Have you painted a piece that has a long, flat surface, whether it's on the sides or on the top, like we have here with the center table, and you're wondering, how do I apply varnish and get that beautiful flat finish? Well, today that's what we're going to work on. I have a couple of different techniques. One that's kind of a old school tip trick that I've used for years that I still use at times when I feel like it's the best way to get what I want out of the finish. So if this is something you're looking forward to, stay tuned today on Wise Out Paint Party. As we always do, we're going to start with what you need. So of course, depending on what surface you're doing, for this particular finish, I did a metallic stencil, and with that I wanted to use our satin varnish to ensure that that metallic paint, our heavy metals metallic paint, continues to keep that sheen, that metallic look to it, because if you use the matte varnish, it will pull a little bit of the sheen away. So just tip and trick for that as well. So you're going to need satin varnish to do the way I'm doing it here, which you can use either or for the way I'm using these techniques. I actually have a Klingon F50, and I'll explain why I have that. I have a Klingon B12. I have, for my little old school tip trick that I've used for years, this is a Shur-Line Handi-painter, and it's basically like a styrofoam with a sponge with a brush all in one. It has this really cool little handle on it, and we'll get into more of why you're gonna need this, but you can get this at any hardware store. I think I got these at Lowe's. And then foot socks, and I'll explain more about why the heck you need foot socks too. But these are gonna go over top of the Handi-painter, and I'll explain more about that. But these are super cheap. Just buy them by the giant size like this if you end up using this technique from Amazon or someplace like that on the cheap, because it's just easier to get that way. And then you're going to need some thumbtacks, and then a tray of some sort to be able to dip the Handi-painter and or paintbrush in, depending on what you decide, and then some aluminum foil. And again, I'll walk through all the steps of why you're going to need all these things, but I just like to start off my videos with what you're going to need so you kind of know up front. And also in the description down below the video, I'll also have everything that I used in this video, so you kind of have it there as well. So the first way that we're going to walk through is just with a brush. Simply, as I've already done on this table, walk through the technique and the way I went about doing it. But the other two steps are going to be what's going to show you a little bit easier way to get that beautiful, flat, flawless, brushstroke free, whatever the word is you want to use, on a large flat surface, whether on the tops or on the sides. All right, so most folks have probably already just simply brushed on a varnish. And what I always use when I do varnish is a Klingon F50. So for what we have on the top of this entryway table right now, that's all I did. Dip the brush in, paint it on. Seems really simple, but if you're brand new to Wise Out Paint and brand new to our varnish, you need to know it dries really, really fast. And it's a little bit thicker. So with those two things combined, the best method to get at least the best brushstroke free finish, I can't guarantee you will, because it just depends on a multiple of things. How you actually follow through on this process, your temperature and humidity within the space you're in, how dry it is. So just be aware that this stuff dries fast. So if you're going to use just a brush, which is only going to cover this much area, you're going to need to go quick. So the long and the short of it is you're going to get a lot of varnish. Don't go thin with this. The thinner you go, the quicker it's going to dry. The quicker it dries, the more you brush through it, the more you're going to end up with those brush strokes that you're going to see, because anything that's a top coat is going to be reflective. And anytime you have those brush strokes that are stuck within something that's reflective, you're going to see everything. And that's probably what most people have a problem with a varnish, a poly, a top coat, is figuring out how to avoid that. Well, one of the biggest ways is to cover a bigger surface so you can cover it the larger, flatter areas faster. So, but if you are just a brush person, or you don't care about the brush strokes, as another example, you can use your Klingon F50. And this is what I normally use. So for this, I dipped it in my little varnish thing. We have cans now. This is an older one. Dip it down in, get as much as you can, get it all over as fast as possible, and then go back and forth all the way across. Nice, gentle feathering strokes all the way across. Now I've already done that for this piece, so I'm not going to do this part. This kind of gives you the idea. That's all you're going to do. That's it. That's all there's to it. But this video is more about how to give you some tips and tricks, 2 other ways that you can go ahead and get varnish on a large flat surface and give you a better advantage of getting that brushstroke free, flat, beautiful finish. So let's go on to the next. Okay, so the other way. So you got that F50 out, you brush stroked it on, and that little brush just took too many strokes, back and forth over your large flat area. So you decide to move up to the big guns. This is the Klingon B12, and it's amazing for just what we're about to do. And this is probably, I'd say 70% of the time I use this, and about 30% of the time I'll use our next tip and trick. But this brush does an amazing job because it is just so big. And as I mentioned, the varnish dries really fast. So the idea is to get it on the largest area the quickest and feather it out the quickest and walk away. And I'm actually going to brush it on this piece because I did the first coat with the F50 so I could show you. I'm going to do the second coat with our B12 and our third coat with our, old school tip trick thing that I've been doing for years that I thought would be beneficial for someone who maybe is just struggling with a brush, right? So I'm actually going to show you, but I wanted to show you, okay, you need your B12. And what you can do if you're not real fond of this handle, and this is something I'll do every once in a while, you can take the handle right off. That way you can grab the B12 and just brush it on just like this, right? So just a little trick that you can take this off and you'll really get a good grip on it so you can lay it down and feather it out. Then you're going to need a tray. I mentioned that in the supply list. What I like to do just to make it really easy for cleanup is I'll lay some aluminum foil over whatever tray or paper plate that I'm using and have that be where I pour the varnish. That way I can just crumple up the aluminum foil and throw it away. So we're going to simply dip, get a lot of varnish, remember, and I'll show you what a lot means so you don't get too much, but you don't get too little, but enough where we're getting a good layer to get onto the piece and then feather it out. Because again, you get too little amount, it's too thin, it's just gonna dry and streak as soon as you pull that brush through that second or third time, depending on how many times you need to feather it out. So I'm gonna pause this. I'm gonna actually bring the camera down so you can see a little closer up exactly what it's looking like. Pour some varnish in my tray and then we'll start from there. All right, so I got you all zoomed in. We got the table all done here, ready to go. We have our tray with our aluminum foil. I've poured my satin varnish down in here. And what I also have is a Klingon F40. And the long and the short of this is I normally have something handy, which I forgot to mention at the beginning. If I have a top I'm working on and the top has sides, I want to have something just to be able to quickly feather in or brush in around the sides, because this guy's a little big, and if I push down in here, I might get too much underneath the rim of it and drips and stuff like that. So you want something a little smaller just to get that quick detailed area. And you might want the same thing if you're going down the side of a dresser that's a large flat area as well. All right, so we're just gonna get right after it. So I'm gonna get my brush in here. I'm not wetting my brush. I'm not spritzing my brush as I would with paint. But I am going to get a good, heavy, generous amount of varnish on this thing. And this thing is so thick, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of pressing the brush down into it and getting it to carry some of that varnish up and not just have varnish on the outsides of the filaments. And one of the things I want to mention while I'm doing this is ensure you do not shake your varnish. So one of the problems you will see with varnishes or polys is if you stir it, you will be fine. But if you shake it, you will get bubbles, and those bubbles will sit in this and then transfer into what you're doing as you're painting it on. So you just want to be mindful of that and make sure you're not shaking, only stirring your varnish. Okay, I think I got enough on here, but I might have to come back. Okay, see, we got it down into the filaments. We got a good thick amount, and we're going to go right on. So what I'm going to do is just brush this across really quick. We're going to go side to side. We're going to get it all on the entire area as quickly as humanly possible, just like this. We're going to go around the sides, and before it gets too dry, and I'm telling you it's going to dry fast, we're going to want to feather it all in. Okay, so I'm brushing this on, and you can see how fast I'm going, really fast. All right, I think that looks good. And now I need to feather. So I take my brush and gently lay over the top. Gently lay over the top. And you see how much area this thing covers, how much easier this would be rather than using maybe an F50. You're not as comfortable brushing it on. Okay, I'm gonna go around the sides, and I might have to touch up with the smaller brush. I might not, depending on how this one goes. This actually has a edge around the outside, almost the same exact size as the brush. So this might work without needing to do that. And I know I'm going to do multiple coats, so I don't need to get too terribly particular with this. Gently feather in the cornered edge, but that's it. I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm going to feather in these little bubbles I have over the corner here, but I'm not going to touch the top anymore. And that's really all there is to it. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen with folks is they just play with it too much and work it and work it and work it. And before you know it, it's drying as they're brushing, and all it's going to do is cause brush strokes. That's all it's going to do. It's going to frustrate you, and then you're going to hate it, and then it's going to be a big pain in the you know what.
And here we go. It's still drying a little bit, but I wanted to just show how beautiful that ended up turning out. I mean, just brush on, walk away, and allow the varnish to settle and flatten and do its thing. You brush it on really quick. You saw it got out a generous amount, brushed it on, got it everywhere, and then feathered it in and left it alone. And that's the key to using it with that big B12 brush.
All right, so you've talked about using two different Klingon brushes, the F50, which is just kind of your general brushing on, your B12 to do large areas all at once, and now another little trick, something that I've used for years. Before I had a B12, this is kind of how I would do it, and still is a very viable option for those that are just not sure about using a brush or have used a brush and just still struggle. So I got some Thumbtacks, I got my Handi-painter, and like I said, it's styrofoam handle inside, a sponge, and then this brush bristle looking deal right here. So how you're going to use it is just as you would expect. You're going to get varnish on it, you're going to go across, but the trick to get a really nice even finish with something like this that's kind of cheap and generic and not necessarily like quality of a Klingon or Weisel premium brush is to get this surface as nice and flat and beautiful as possible, one, and two, the little bristles will sneak off here and there. So I'm not even gonna lie to you, you might find one or two of these little guys in your varnish. So what I do to avoid having that happen, one, and two, to give a nice, beautiful, flat surface, which I'm going to show you here in a second, is I grab these foot socks. So we're going to take 3 of these foot socks. You can do 3, 4, 5, 10, however many you want to do. I know 1 or 2 is not enough. So at least 3. So you're going to put the foot sock on and pull it all the way across and all the way to the other side. And this is what you're going to get. And you can see it kind of evens out the surface a little bit, but I'm not sure how much you can see, but you can still see the bristles are wanting to peek through. But the loose ones that are in there will more than likely stay down inside the foot socks and not all over your finish. I can tell you, if you were to do this without the foot socks, you will likely have at least 10 to 15 of those little teeny tiny bristles all throughout your finish. So definitely don't skip this step. And again, it probably will still happen. You just probably still have one or two, but I can tell you this method was so helpful, especially at the beginning of my painting journey, to get those large flat surfaces with a poly or polyacrylic or whatever I was using back then, and now a varnish, that it was worth having those couple little pieces after doing the foot socks in there, and then once it dries, just kind of rub it and have it fly out. So here we go. We're going to go with the third one, and you'll have that happen even with a regular brush or just debris in general. Like I had a couple little specks from the handle that was inside the B12 fall down into this finish when I did it earlier. And you just wait till it dries and rub it out, and you'll be just fine. And that's the thing. Don't try to get it while it's wet, because if you start to try to get like a little piece of lint or something that's in there while it's wet, you're going to put your fingerprint, you're going to mush the varnish, just as we talked about. You're going to, leave some type of mark within it instead of it being nice and flat and dry, and then just kind of rubbing over the spot until that little piece pops out or falls out or whatever. So there we go. Look at how nice that is. So you got a nice flat surface. You got any of those loose bristles that are going to be in there to stay within the foot socks. So last little trick, I always take some tacks, because this is styrofoam, and just tack the ends, and you'll see there'll be some tugging and pulling from the varnish when you're laying it on. And this is just another one of those little tricks that helped with the foot socks staying on your Handi-painter and not falling all over the place while you're trying to brush the varnish onto your surface. So just trust me, this is it's worth going grabbing you a box of tacks. And you can use your tacks in your shop for drawer glides, on the inside if you ever have one fall out too. So it's just something you should have in the shop anyway. So that's going to be how you set up. And I wanted to go over that just so you could kind of see. It's a little weird, a little different. So like I said, just kind of an old school tip that I had been using for a while and had always worked really well for me when I was doing those tops of dressers, where I wanted to get all that area and get it all nice without any brush strokes and kind of nonsense all through it. And as you can see, it's a flat surface, it's a wide surface, just like the B12. The only difference is this is completely flat, so you have a different approach to, you're not laying and brushing, you're just going to kind of get it on all over, go over nice even strokes one last time, and then walk away and leave it alone. And this may leave a little bit more, might look like there's more on there than the brush did, but again, the varnish self levels really, really well. So the biggest thing is not to overwork it. So we're going to go ahead and get to this. I'm going to pause it, come back, have everything all dipped and ready to go. I got to make sure I have enough satin varnish, and then I'm actually going to apply this for you so you can see how this works. All right, so once again, we have our tray with aluminum foil, and again, you can just take the aluminum foil off, throw it away when you're done, and you can actually pour the varnish back into the container if you don't use it all. And again, it just makes it that much easier for cleanup. And for this Handi-painter, if you can find a tray of some sort that's going to fit where this sits right down in it. That's the same thing with the B12. This won't fit in the container for varnish, and neither will the B12. So you're going to need something separate from. So the same concept with the brush. You saw I was dipping and playing with the brush in there for a hot minute. And the biggest thing was I was trying to get those filaments to hold as much varnish so I could carry it over and get as much on in that first go right? So I'm going to do the same thing. So we know there's a sponge and bristles on this thing. So we're going to push it down in until the sponge absorbs some of that varnish. So we're just not trying to dip it and get the little tips of the bristles. We're trying to get the sponge into this action here because we want to be able to lay it on and all the way across without having to go back and forth to our little tray here. So I'm going to just make sure I get enough. All right, I think that's going to do it. Okay, I'm going to bring it over here and we're just going to go on. And the cool thing about this is it's so flat, we can just kind of lay it on there however you want to. Just do it quick. Whatever you do it quick, right? Just like this, all the way down, all the way back. And then once we get it all the way on there, we're going to go long strokes. Okay, I got it on there. We're going to go long stroke all the way across. Long stroke all the way across. Long stroke all the way across. And one more long stroke all the way across, and then I'm done. And that's it. That's all you're gonna do. And you can see it's a little cloudy in spots. It's discolored in spots. All it is the moisture. The cloudy nature of the varnish will go away. It will turn clear, which you saw before I started. I varnished that thing 3 times and it still looked like Poseidon and the Heavy Metals gilding paints. It didn't look all cloudy like this, right? Because it dries and it dries crystal clear. So all you're gonna see is what's below. But initially when you lay it on, you might freak out a little bit because you're like, wait a minute, how come this and how come that? Just give it the time it needs to dry. But as I did with a brush, I did with a Handi-painter. You got it on really quick and then you went long even strokes across and then you walk away. Do not play with it. If I would have went one more time, I probably would have started leaving brush strokes or streaks all through this thing. So that's all you're gonna need to do. And then if you wanna go around the edges, let me fix my little foot sock, got a little loose on this one. And that might happen, you just pull it back over, tighten it out, right? And then around the edge, I might wanna go and lay a nice little one shot all the way around kind of thing, just to get the edge the same number of coats as we had at the top. And there's still going to be some in this because it's a sponge, so there's still a good little bit in there. Not enough that you want to keep playing with the top, but enough where you can hit some of those detailed areas. And that's another thing that's kind of cool about this is it's got the handle. You kind of get in and around some of those detailed areas you might have, say, on the side of a dresser, or if you got to get underneath here to get any drips. So you might not need an extra brush to play with it. But that's it. That's all there is to it. Another fun little technique. Wanted to share something I've used for a while to get those large flat areas. I'm just looking it over to make sure I got it real good. I think I did. And I might do a time lapse or something just to kind of show you how this dries, or maybe I'll just come back and show you what it looks like when we're done. But those are our 2 methods that we have for you. We have a B12 and we have this Shur-Line Handi-painter. And I'll come back and I'll, like I said, I'll show you the final result. And then soon I'll have some final pictures to share over on my page. All right, for those that might ask, what do you do with this Handi-painter when you're done? So obviously the foot socks are no good. Those you're gonna need to pull off, right? Take those off and put those on your aluminum foil tray. But this guy, you can use multiple times. Again, it's just a sponge with some bristles. So you wanna go take this, rinse it off really, really good so it doesn't get hard. There's been a couple times where I didn't rinse it out well enough and I went back to go use it and it was hard as a rock. These are fairly cheap, so you don't necessarily need to do that. But I mean, for me, if I can use something, 4 or 5 or 6 times, as long as I do the right thing, then I'm gonna go ahead and do that to save, spending money where I didn't need to. So I'm gonna go rinse this off and then let it dry, and then I'll have it for another time that I need it. So if anybody's wondering like what you do with this as far as cleaning, that's gonna be all there is to it, because The varnish is a water-based product, so really easy to clean. Same thing with the brushes. I took the B12 in and I washed it off right away. It's not something you want to leave in a bag or sitting overnight. You want to wash it right away with hot water. I usually just use hot water because the Klingons clean so very well. But if you ever feel like you need a little soap, you could use some dish soap or laundry soap or something like that as well. But most of the time, the hot water will work really well. And then you can actually leave it suspended in water a little bit after to see if there's any remnants of the varnish that wants to come off, which you can do as well. But that's what you need to do for cleanup. Throw your aluminum foil away and you're done. Again, I will come back. I will show what this looks like all done. You can see it's already starting to dry. That cloudiness is starting to go away, and give you my final thoughts about these tips and tricks adding varnish to a large flat surface. And there you have it, a couple different tricks, tips, whatever you want to call them, on how to get our varnish laid down flat and beautiful on large flat surfaces. So whether you use an F50, as I talked about at the beginning, a B12 Klingon, or the old school trick with a Handi-painter and foot socks, the biggest thing is getting the varnish on, feathering it out, and walking away. Do not overwork this stuff. Again, it dries very fast, and that'll be your biggest problem. And another thing, last little thing, if you brush on, feather out, and you see a spot you missed, do not go back to it. If you've only done one coat, it's gonna take two. That first coat, you're gonna have spots where you missed here and there. You're gonna just resign yourself to the fact that you're gonna do a second coat. And I can tell you for most pieces that I've done, it's at least 2 coats to get complete coverage with the varnish, because again, you do not want to go over spots you've already brushed in and feathered out, and you don't wanna try to fix problems that you have. So rather just do another solid coat to fix any little issues or spots you might have missed than, cause those brush strokes. Because then you're gonna have to do some sanding and figure out how you can smooth it back out and then do a second coat anyway. So just try these tips. Grab a sample board in your garage, grab a Handi-painter from your hardware store, some foot socks from Amazon, and some B12 or F50 from your local YSL retailer. And speaking of that, if you want to try our varnish or the Klingon brushes, your local YSL retailers will have that for you. In the description down below this video, I'll have how to find the one nearest you. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you are enjoying the videos here on YSL Paint Party, please subscribe, share, so we can get this out to more people that are learning about YSL paint, and just maybe take a little bit of that fear away. We know the salve is super easy to use. The easiest top coat you'll ever use is salve, and it's amazing and beautiful. But if you're looking for something a little bit more durable, like our varnish or 1-hour enamel clear coat, these are techniques that can help it just make it that much easier for you to do. Hope everybody has a blessed day, and as always, happy painting.